Hello, and welcome to our talk today on nutrition and sleep. Let's just have a little go through what we're going to cover. Okay, so we're going to start with a little recap on how we sleep, and we're specifically looking at circadian rhythms today. We're then going to look at how food affects our circadian rhythms, covering meal timings, nutrient timings in specific foods, meal frequency, time-restricted feeding, weight loss, and any kind of caveats. And also looking at how sleep affects our food, and then I'll just give you a little summary to wrap it all up and hopefully give you a few things to take away. So before we start, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Sammy. I've done a few talks before in summer, so I was probably in a nice strappy top rather than in a jumper that's rather chilly. Also, I should say it is periodically chucking it down outside, so apologies if you can hear that in the background. But yes, I'm Sammy from Cbd Nutrition. I'm an MNU certified nutritionist, and I'm also studying to be a certified sleep and recovery coach. I'm really excited to talk about these. Nutrition and sleep are definitely two of my favourite topics, and I think the combination is probably one of the most underrated things going, so I'm excited to share this. Okay, so have a little recap how we sleep. So we would have talked about in previous presentations the kind of mechanics around how we sleep. So I'm just going to loosely touch on it now with these kind of three things. So if you want more information, just go back and check the other presentations and you'll get some more insight. So we have our sleep pressure system, we have our balanced arousal system, and we have our circadian timing. These are all the three things that create optimal sleep. And as I said at the start, circadian timings is what we're focusing on today. That's where, that's a part that nutrition has to play. So circadian rhythm, so a naturally occurring internal rhythm of around 24 hours, even in the absence of light fluctuations. So if you were in a dark cave, you still would have a natural circadian rhythm of around 24 hours. It's actually slightly longer. It's about 24 hours and 15 minutes. But yes, we have these, and no matter what the light fluctuations are doing. So then we have Chrono Nutrition, which is circadian biology and diet. So that's where the circadian rhythm and nutrition comes to play to create the wonderful world of Chrono Nutrition. Yeah, so as I said here, our eating habits can affect our circadian rhythm and can therefore have implications on our health. So that's what Chrono Nutrition is all about, looking at that. Okay, so meal timings. We're going to look at the distribution of calories, time-restricted feeding, nutrient timing, kind of different internal preferences based on genetics, because that does play a little bit of a part, and looking at any kind of supplements or sleep aids. Okay, so energy intake distribution. So this is basically looking at the kind of volume of calories you consume at different times of the day. So calories being just a unit of measurement of energy. So ultimately, yeah, this distribution of calories throughout the day does matter. I'm going to just kind of go top level stuff because we've got a fair bit to get through. So I'm just going to give you kind of, top level information, and I won't be going so much into about the kind of science and evidence behind it, just giving you hopefully some practical things to take away. So studies favour eating the majority of our calories earlier in the day. So having a larger breakfast and a smaller dinner compared to having a smaller breakfast and a larger dinner, which kind of goes the opposite of what we've always known. What's it like? Eat breakfast as a king. I don't know what the rest is. But yeah, it kind of goes against a fair bit of thinking. So ideally just having a higher proportion in the morning. There's some of these studies, so greater energy expenditure was shown throughout the day when a higher proportion of calories were consumed in the morning compared to later in the day. So ultimately, eating more calories in the day, you tend to expend a little bit more. I should just say that it kind of was matched. So the people who, in this one particular study, the people who had breakfast early, yes, they did expend more energy. But the people who were only started eating at lunchtime, they expended less, but they also consumed less. So it kind of did balance it out. But it's also been shown, front heavy energy intake shows greater difference in glucose response, hunger, and body composition. So compared to having that heavy energy intake later in the day. So all good things to think about. Glucose response, a sign of metabolic health. Hunger, just important for yeah, just everyday life, and body composition, if that's something that you're into. And to be fair, this is probably something that I would have thought differently. I used to think, and I think a lot of the kind of Fitspo industry thinks that meal timing for body composition doesn't really matter, and it only has a small effect, and there are definitely way bigger things that you need to think about before you think about kind of meal timing when it comes to weight loss, but it definitely still does play its role. Okay, time restricted feeding. Yeah, so time restricted feeding, by this, so you might have heard of like the 16-8, where you fast for 16 hours and then you eat within an 8-hour window. So yeah, 16-8, time restricted feeding, intermittent fasting, same kind of names. And that has been shown to have, be beneficial for your metabolic health and body composition again. When it comes to body composition, they're not entirely sure why. Likely because it just reduces that energy intake window, like the kind of amount of time you actually can intake that energy, which naturally just decreases your energy intake, which ultimately is important for losing weight. It's also something easy to do without too much nutrition education. So if you're looking to lose weight, there was a study, and I think they brought forward they took their breakfast time back an hour and a half, and they brought their last meal of the day forwards an hour and a half. So there was a kind of a 3-hour window where they weren't eating when they normally would have been, and that was the only intervention they did, and it showed greater weight loss than the kind of control. So it just shows that you kind of don't need so much nutritional education, and it's just a really simple thing to do. Metabolic health, like due to circadian rhythms, and kind of based on what I just mentioned about energy intake distribution, it makes sense to have that kind of time restricted window in the front half of the day. So eating earlier and finishing, and then having a period in the evening without eating. But it's also important to note that we don't actually really know how big this window should be, or the exact timings. There's still research that needs to be done around that. Okay, so looking at nutrient timing, so we're kind of looking at the macronutrients now. So carbohydrates, a high carb meal before bed has been associated with better sleep. This is likely because it allows tryptophan to cross the blood-brain barrier, which kind of is the precursor to serotonin, which is also then leads to melatonin being the sleep hormone, which I think, again, would have been talked about in the other talks. And that kind of leads to that feeling of sleepiness. But a big however, we become less insulin sensitive as the day goes on. So we are better able to deal with that glucose in our blood earlier in the day. Insulin sensitivity and beta cell function are highest in the morning. This beta cell function, beta cells is where the insulin is secreted from the pancreas. So again, just all down to blood sugar levels, which is a sign of metabolic health, but potentially even more important if you're diabetic. So again, it's kind of the idea of having carbs before bed has been seen to help sleep, but also in terms of circadian rhythms, it might help you fall asleep, but for metabolic health, might not be as ideal, simply because we're less insulin sensitive throughout the day. This is kind of a classic in nutrition. There'll be lots of things that kind of go against each other ever so slightly. So it will really depend on each individual, basically, and what works for you. So fats delay gastric emptying. So they basically just slow digestion, and your food just stays in your stomach longer, which is often why consuming a high fat food before bed might make you feel uncomfortable, because it takes a while to digest, basically. So just trying to leave it a few hours before you go to sleep if you're having fats. Protein, as I said, it reduces muscle protein breakdown. So the breakdown of your muscles, basically. So trying to have a relatively high dose of protein in your last meal of the day will help to slow down this muscle protein breakdown. And we're looking at casein in particular. It's a type of protein, just because it's a slow releasing protein, and obviously we don't eat while we're asleep, so that slow release will help that muscle protein breakdown. But I should also say muscle protein breakdown is a kind of important part of the whole muscle protein turnover, and we do actually need it as part of our kind of muscle growth and repair. It is an important process, but we can still limit it by having a big dose of protein. Yes. Okay, so moving on to the genetic influence with respect to circadian rhythm. So your genetics does play a part in your circadian rhythms, and we have chronotypes, so individual internal circadian preferences. So these are kind of broken down into 4 different animals, basically based on how these actual animals do live their lives. So we have our lion. So lions wake up early, they're productive in the morning, so they go to bed early, kind of equates for 15 to 20% of the population. We then have our bear, which is around half the population, generally just active with the sun. So you are productive kind of mid-noon, you go to bed earlier, and you're also slightly more influenced by the external cues that would have been mentioned in the series earlier on. We have our wolf, which are the classic night owl, 15 to 20% of the population, and finally we have the dolphin. So they're usually the irregular sleepers, light sleepers. You may find it hard to stay asleep. You'll likely stay up late. You are productive mid-afternoon, and it equates for roughly 10% of the population. So I've included the link at the bottom, the Power of When quiz, which will help you work out which chronotype you are. And these, it may be that you're not one completely. I'm probably a bear, but also I'm a bit of a lion. So yeah, and there are preferences for pretty much everything we do. Not everything we do, but for lots of things. So your chronotype will help you with the best time to exercise, best time to have coffee, best time to nap if you should nap, all that kind of stuff. So it's just quite interesting, really. And yeah, it does. Your genetics will play a part in this. So interesting. So this relates to when it's kind of optimal for each chronotype to eat food. So I won't go into all of this because you can just pause me, have a little read, go and open a new browser and do the Power of When quiz and work out which chronotype you are. They'll also give you way more information, but there's just a little overview here. And then there's also the time-restricted eating kind of window, going back to what I mentioned earlier and how it might be beneficial for metabolic health. Just giving you a kind of an example. I have to say, so I haven't got the breakfast, lunch and dinner times for the dolphin. I won't lie, I couldn't find it. Looking through all my resources and papers, but I couldn't find it and I didn't just want to make it up. So yes, apologies if you're a dolphin, but I should also say, let's move on. It's important to stay flexible here and not get bunged down in, I'm a bear, this is what I must do. Because it's not like completely kind of tunnel visioned, and being flexible will be much more beneficial to you to be able to do that. And don't take your lunchtime as it has to be done that way, because half the time it might not be realistic for you and it might not fit into your lifestyle. Also, genetic only tells a small part of the story. So this kind of affects around makes up 30% of your circadian rhythm, and 70% is the levers and timing cues, which are ultimately a lot more important than these. So which again is why it's important to stay flexible and try not to get too bunged down in these, although it's cool and it is really interesting to see. Okay, meal frequency. So the consistency of your meal times and frequency is important. So we have hormones which are stimulated by their own little internal clock. So we have our circadian rhythms, which is all done by the master clock, which then cues all of these other internal clocks in different kind of organs. And so our food absorption is done in the gut tissue, and insulin secretion in the pancreas, and all of these have their own little internal body clocks. And they will basically be ready for your when you eat food. If it's consistent, they're going to be ready, and that's when they're going to be used to it. So studies have shown that a regular routine of 3 meals and 3 snacks a day is associated with better glucose response than alternating between kind of 3 meals and 9 meals. So again, it's just that consistency, which I think we likely would have kind of hopefully brought home in kind of earlier series. And just knowing that for circadian health, consistency is really important, and the same goes for your nutrition. So keep your meal timings and frequency as consistent as you can. So pretty much everything I've said, there are definitely caveats to this. I've said, yeah, consistency of your meals and frequency is probably the most important thing. But I kind of mentioned before that like adherence is the most important thing, and for a lot of people this isn't realistic. Having a smaller meal in the evening might not be realistic if you really value having a nice family meal at the end of the day. And it may be that your work schedule doesn't work with this. It may be that you are a night shift worker and that doesn't work. Also, it doesn't kind of take into account social life and occasions. I know there's not much going on right now, but hopefully as things start to kind of open up, yeah, that social life will start to come alive again. And we won't want to be thinking about, oh, but Sammy said that I should eat a smaller meal. Like our social life plays such a big part of life, and equally, like food is about so much more than it just making you healthy. And yeah, social occasion is a big part of that health. So another caveat that sometimes it just doesn't work. And as much as we would like to be really, really consistent, yeah, those social occasions, do them, enjoy them. They will keep you happy and healthy. Another caveat is for athletes. So they often have a really high training volume and basically they just need more energy. Energy availability is the most important thing for performance. And so kind of trying to not eat before they go to bed or having a small meal just isn't probably optimal for performance. Also, if they're looking for muscle growth, again, they're going to need to stimulating that muscle protein synthesis as many times in the day as they can to stimulate that muscle growth and repair. And this kind of just doesn't really work for that. And same for if you're resistance training in the evening, that kind of recovery is really important. And after you trained in the evening, you'll need that kind of dose of protein, that fuel to start help with that repairing process that you just put the strain under. Put your muscles under. So there are caveats to this, as I've said, and it's not the be all and end all. It's just kind of interesting, and if you can implement it, fab, great. But yeah, consistency is probably the most important thing here. So looking at, are there any foods that can help us sleep? Firstly, I'd just say there's a lot we don't know about kind of specific foods and sleep. Ultimately, they are likely to have very little effect if you're not addressing any other areas that we would have mentioned previously. So like your light, dark, if you're the sleep arousal, if you're staying on your phone before you go to bed. There's so many bigger things to think about before looking at your nutrition in terms of your circadian rhythm. I mean, I obviously love this topic, but I'm very aware that there's no point addressing it if you're not addressing the bigger picture. Okay, yeah, so studies have shown that populations who consume lots of fruits, oily, fish, nuts, seeds have better sleep. So kind of diets which are generally linked with, similar to the Mediterranean style diets, have better sleep. And meals high in protein and fiber are associated with better sleep than meals that are high in unsaturated fats and sugars. So basically, nothing new here, just looking for that varied diets, just the standard healthy diet that we all know about. That is what's optimal for sleep, so absolutely no shock there. Sleep and moods are closely affected, so eating a diverse range of foods can help sleep. Basically because food, so our gut, like 90% of that serotonin is produced in your gut. So what you do eat can affect that. So eating that diverse range of foods will help support the microbiome. It will reduce inflammation and improve mood, which ultimately all of those things will affect your sleep. So yeah, not really looking at any kind of specifics. If you feel that there is a food that helps you sleep, it probably does. I mean, it's likely the placebo, and coming back to kind of consistency and your body expecting things at certain times. If you have your like nuts at like 6 p.m. every night or whatever time, maybe 8 p.m. And you find that helps you sleep, it likely does because you have them and it's that consistency of having them, and it's kind of like that signal that associates kind of you starting to wind down and start to get ready for bed. So the food itself probably not likely helping you sleep, but it's more placebo and the kind of routine that you associate around it. Yes. Okay. Sleep supplements. like any supplements when it comes to nutrition, not to be relied on, and it's kind of make sure you're covering all the other bases before you then look at supplements. So yeah, shouldn't be relied on. They might make a small difference once you've covered all the other areas again. So it's a last resort. Make sure you're addressing all other areas of your sleep first, and then they might be helpful. So evidence-based sleep supplements, melatonin, it's not available to buy in the UK. It can only be prescribed. Yeah, so it's difficult to get. Also, I read a study the other day, and it said that it will likely help you get to sleep 7 minutes earlier and stay asleep for 30 minutes longer. So it's not a great deal. Things like Cherry Active. Oh, that says cheery. Cheery Active, that sounds nice. Cherry Active, which is basically, yeah, tart cherry juice. It's basically high in melatonin, which is an antioxidant. So, yeah, which can help melatonin and sleep. And as I said, not to be relied on really. Yeah, it's full of antioxidants, which can be a hindrance if you are looking to adapt from training. So if you've done a heavy bout of training, yes, it helps recovery and it helps kind of inflammation. But it might not be actually ideal because you need that. You need to recover from that. And we actually don't want to reduce that inflammation because it's part of the process. But yes, Cherry Active, sleep might help. But again, only if you've addressed other things. There's mixed evidence on magnesium supplementation. Yeah, the evidence is really mixed, but it's usually kind of anecdotal. Yeah, anecdotally, people find it helpful. Again, it might be the placebo, but we take it. If it works, it works. Even if it's not necessarily evidence-based, if it works, yeah. The last thing, CBD oil. So this is a fairly new kind of thing that's around. Probably about 5 years ago, there was very little studies on CBD oil, but a very exciting kind of area to be looked at. In the last 3 years, there's been lots of evidence around it, not so much around CBD and oil and sleep, but just its benefits on kind of helping reduce anxiety and stress, which ultimately will affect sleep. And I know I'm aware of a study that's kind of going on at the moment that is looking directly at sleep and CBD oil, which is very exciting, but unfortunately there's kind of no big, there's no data to come out from it as of yet. It's too early. So a really interesting one to keep an eye on. It might be helpful, yeah, so it's kind of looking encouraging that it might help because, yeah, it can help reduce that anxiety, which will, yeah, basically help sleep. And again, anecdotally, people seem to think that it does help. So yeah, that's great. Watch this space on CBD oil, basically. I'm just going to plug my laptop in. It's just given me a nice little warning. Okay. Sleep hindrance. So these will have been covered slightly, so I'll just kind of cruise over them. Caffeine, so it binds to the adenosine receptors. So adenosine, struggling with that today. Adenosine is that sleep pressure that builds up in the brain, and that's what makes you feel sleepy. And yeah, stopping the signal for sleep pressure, stopping that signal promotes that wakefulness. So the thing about caffeine is it stays in the system for a long time. It does differ from person to person. I personally metabolize caffeine quite slowly, so I'm quite affected by it. So like it's like in my half-life of caffeine is slightly longer. And there's I think about, it's a very small percentage of the population, like 1%ish, that aren't affected by caffeine. So even if you don't feel like you're affected and it doesn't seem to keep you awake at night, it will be affecting your sleep stages and you're just unaware of it. So it is a big deal, and it's a really good area to address first if you're having issues sleeping. Yeah, caffeine crash. So when the caffeine wears off and the adenosine that was already there but couldn't bind to the receptors in your brain is then met by more sleep pressure, more adenosine, you're suddenly met with a lot of adenosine, and that's where you have a bit of a caffeine crash and you suddenly feel very sleepy. Alcohol. So alcohol is a sedative. My granddad used to have a whiskey before he went to bed as a nightcap every night, and he always thought it helped him sleep. Which it did. It's a sedative. It does that, but it just it really disrupts your sleep later on in the later sleep cycles, which has a big impact on sleep. I've put these images here. Coffee, not forgetting that there is caffeine in green tea, things like that. Generally around 30 milligrams. In coffee, there's about 80 to 120 milligrams. Chocolate, again, there is some in dark chocolate, around 30, 40 milligrams, and also Diet Coke as well, in general, just caffeinated drinks, not just diet. Yeah, any kind of Coke. So briefly looking at how does sleep affect our nutrition. So we've looked at the other way around. I really love dogs, so I just wanted to get a dog picture, and not going to lie, and look how cute he looks. Okay, so insufficient sleep is associated with increased appetite. So it increases our ghrelin. So ghrelin is the hunger hormone. Think of it as gremlin. That's the way I remember. Yeah, it makes you more hungry. And decreased leptin. Leptin is your fullness hormone. So we've got this increased appetite and decreased fullness. So ultimately, yeah, it causes havoc with our appetite when we're sleep deprived. Food choices. So we have a greater preference towards high fat, high carb foods. And also you just have that decreased motivation, because ultimately we've all been there. When you're really tired, you just want that like instant sugar. And perhaps you've been on a diet and you're tired and you find it motivation is really, really difficult. And that kind of links in with, so 90% of people will eat everything that's on their plate. And the effects, the kind of cognitive effects that lack of sleep has on the brain as well, makes it really difficult to suss out what a normal portion looks like. And it's hard to, associate, is this a portion that I'd normally have? And then the fact, coupled with the fact that most people eat everything on their plate anyway, can make it difficult. Emotional eating. So with lack of sleep, we have that increased cortisol, the stress hormone, associated with increased cravings. As I kind of mentioned, we're seeking that short-term energy. Sleep is also linked to the amygdala, which is a very reactive and impulsive center of the brain, which can be, throw a bit of a spanner in the works when you're kind of choosing what to eat, and maybe walking past the bakery smelling delicious baked goods, and that impulsiveness will likely make you go in and want to have one. And as I kind of mentioned before, sleep is linked with the gut, which again is linked with serotonin and just general, feeling happiness. So emotional eating is often increased when we're sleepy. A quick note on body composition. So you're more likely to hold on to fat and shed muscle for energy when you're sleep deprived. A nice little study showed that those who consumed the same amount of calories but had either 5.5 hours or 8.5 hours of sleep found that those on the greater amounts lost 55% more fat and maintained 60% more muscle. So that is quite a big deal. Bottom line, if you're trying to diet, sleep is going to be super important. Okay, final thoughts. I've rambled on for long enough. We've covered an awful lot. Let's just sum it up. So nutrition and our circadian health, timing matters, but only if you're addressing all other areas of your kind of circadian alignment, as we will have mentioned in previous talks. If you can, aim to eat a larger proportion of your calories earlier in the day, but most importantly, stay consistent. That is hopefully something that most people can do to a certain degree. Staying consistent will be really helpful. When it comes to weight loss, again, timing does play a part, but it's likely a small part, simply because, again, other factors are much more important. Ultimately, being in your energy deficit is the only way to lose weight. So it can be a small part to look at, but there'll be other bigger areas to address first. And as I mentioned, lack of sleep can make weight loss harder. And finally, how sleep affects nutrition. So sleep curtailment increases appetite, reduces fullness, and favours hyperpalatable foods. Right, so that is an awful lot of information. If you have any questions, do feel free to comment them on this. I will have a little look. Or email me at scoop.nutrition.training@gmail.com. If you would like some more information on sleep and nutrition, anything like that, I am generally on Instagram. That's probably the best place to find me. I'm generally pretty active every day. You will see me probably in my dressing gown, because that is where I spend most of my life, because I'm a cold person. And it was a big deal for me to not wear it today, actually, for this. I thought I'd give you all a good first impression. So don't be alarmed if you come and find me on Instagram and I'm there in my dressing gown. Pretty standard stuff. That is everything. I hope you've enjoyed this. As I said, I love talking about it, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. That's it. I hope you have a lovely day and a restful sleep.